The Navy SEAL asked for her call sign, but she just said Ghost 9 and vanished into the shadows without a trace. Her words hung in the air like a haunting promise, leaving everyone wondering who she really was and where she had gone. The mission would never be the same after her mysterious disappearance, setting in motion events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about loyalty and secrecy. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the long corridor of Naval Special Warfare Command. John Smith adjusted his uniform as he approached Maria Silva, the woman whose analytical reports had become legendary throughout the Virginia Beach facility. Something about her had always intrigued him, perhaps the quiet confidence that seemed at odds with her official role as a senior intelligence analyst. "Excuse me," John called out, his voice echoing slightly against the polished floors. "I've been meaning to ask you something." Maria turned, her sharp cheekbones accentuated by the harsh lighting. Her eyes, calculating, observant, assessed him in an instant. Not like an analyst studying data, but like someone cataloging threats. "Yes, Lieutenant," she replied, her tone professional but guarded. John smiled, attempting to break through her reserve. "Everyone around here has a call sign. I was wondering what yours is." The question hung in the air between them. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or wariness. Then her expression settled into chilling calm. "Ghost 9, she answered simply. The two words sent an unexpected chill down John's spine. Before he could process her response or ask a follow-up question, Maria melted into the bustling crowd of uniformed personnel, disappearing with an efficiency that seemed almost practiced. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds, but its impact rippled through the base within hours. The name Ghost 9 wasn't just any call sign. It carried weight, whispered in secure briefings and classified reports. Everyone at Virginia Beach had heard rumors about Maria. On paper, she was unremarkable, methodical in her analysis, reserved in meetings, always keeping to herself in the mess hall. Her reports consistently provided insights that other analysts missed, putting her one step ahead of her colleagues. But there was something else about her that made even hardened SEALs take notice. The way she moved through the facility, silent, deliberate, aware of every exit and entrance. The way her eyes missed nothing, tracking movements with the precision of someone trained to spot threats in hostile territory. Commander Pedro Costa had noticed it too. He'd watch her during briefings, the way she absorbed information, the way she occasionally corrected operational details with a certainty that seemed beyond her official experience. "There's more to her than she lets on," he'd commented once to Lieutenant Santos after a particularly insightful briefing. Now, as word of her call sign spread, the whispers intensified. Ghost 9 wasn't just any identifier. It was a legend, a phantom that had haunted intelligence reports for years, and somehow it belonged to the quiet analyst who walked their halls. On paper, Maria Silva's personnel file was a study in bureaucratic blandness. 26 years old, senior intelligence analyst, specializing in European terrorist networks and threat assessment. Her academic credentials were solid but unremarkable. A master's degree from a respectable university, language proficiency in 4 European tongues, and the standard security clearances required for her position at Naval Special Warfare Command. What the file couldn't capture was how Maria's analyses consistently outperformed every prediction model the intelligence community had developed. When she spoke about terrorist cells operating in the Balkans, her insights weren't just statistical probabilities. They contained nuances about individual leaders' decision-making patterns, details about safe houses never documented in official reports, and operational weaknesses that seemed impossible to know without having been there. "The Sarajevo cell won't move through the main checkpoint," she once stated during a briefing, her voice measured and confident. "They've established a relationship with a customs official who works Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Eastern Crossing. They'll wait for his shift." The operation that followed confirmed every detail. The intelligence division attributed it to her exceptional analytical skills, but no one questioned how an analyst could know which specific guard was compromised or the exact timing of the arrangement. Her colleagues respected her abilities, but found her difficult to know personally. Maria maintained professional relationships, cordial, collaborative when necessary, but never crossing into friendship. She ate lunch alone most days, reviewing files while others socialized. The intelligence team saw her sharp cheekbones and cool analytical stare, noting how she never seemed rattled by pressure or surprised by new information. What they couldn't see was the truth. Maria wasn't just analyzing missions, she was living them. 3 months before joining the Virginia Beach team, she had personally infiltrated that same Sarajevo network, memorizing faces, documenting routines, and identifying the corrupted border official through weeks of patient surveillance. Each report she filed contained knowledge gained not through databases or satellite imagery, but through her own eyes and ears in the field. When she discussed terrorist hideouts, she recalled the smell of cigarette smoke that permeated the walls. When she identified security vulnerabilities, she remembered testing them herself, slipping past guards in the dead of night. Maria Silva existed in a strange duality, physically present in briefing rooms and offices, yet simultaneously a ghost, her true experiences and capabilities invisible to everyone around her. She walked among them as both colleague and stranger, her most remarkable achievements hidden behind the mundane cover of an analyst's desk. Commander Pedro Costa leaned back in his chair, studying the latest intelligence report from Maria Silva. The head of intelligence at Naval Special Warfare Command had developed a habit of reading her analyses first, before all others. Her uncanny ability to predict target behavior had caught his attention within weeks of her arrival at Virginia Beach. "How did you know the cell would move their operation to Marseille?" Pedro asked during their third one-on-one meeting. His weathered face betrayed both admiration and suspicion. Maria's response was practiced perfection. "The shipping manifests in the Eurodac database showed unusual patterns, sir. When cross-referenced with communication intercepts," she gestured toward her computer screen, redirecting his attention to data points that supported her conclusion while revealing nothing of her true sources. The commander nodded, not entirely convinced. "Your insights saved lives last week. The team was prepared exactly where they needed to be." This became their routine. Maria would produce intelligence of startling accuracy, Pedro would press for her methodology, and she would cite databases, algorithms, and analytical frameworks. Then she would subtly steer the conversation toward operational planning, away from her sources. Her reputation within the command grew with each successful mission. Operations in Eastern Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, all guided by her precise intelligence, yielded unprecedented results. Senior officers whispered about her golden touch. Tactical teams requested her by name for mission prep. Yet no one, not even Pedro, with his 23 years of intelligence experience, could explain how she was always right. The truth would have shocked them all. At 19, while officially studying international relations at university, Maria had been identified and recruited by a classified Joint European Task Force. They had recognized something in her psychological profile, an exceptional combination of analytical brilliance, physical capability, and moral flexibility that made her perfect for their most sensitive operations. She hadn't been sent to an intelligence office, but thrust directly into the shadows. The task force gave her a new identity, erased her past, and trained her to become something that officially didn't exist, a phantom operative who could infiltrate terrorist networks, criminal organizations, and hostile intelligence services. For years, Maria moved through Europe's darkest corners, gathering intelligence firsthand, eliminating threats when necessary, and vanishing without a trace. Her missions existed only in the memories of her handlers, never on paper, never in databases, never acknowledged. Now, as she sat across from Commander Costa in his office, Maria knew she was living a dangerous paradox. The very missions she analyzed had often been her own handiwork. Operations she had executed under different names, in different countries, leaving no evidence of her presence except the results themselves. For 7 years, Maria Silva had lived in the shadows, a ghost among the living. She moved through Europe's crowded streets and the Middle East's dusty villages with practiced invisibility. Her missions were the ones no conventional team could handle. The operations so sensitive they existed only as redacted files in the most secure servers. In Paris, she had infiltrated a cell planning to detonate explosives at the Louvre. The intelligence analyst dismantled their network, piece by piece, turning members against each other until they collapsed from within. No shots fired, no evidence left behind, just whispers of a phantom operative who knew too much. In Istanbul, Maria spent 3 months as a cleaner in a high-rise where arms dealers conducted their business. She memorized security patterns, identified weaknesses, and when the moment came, neutralized 4 targets without raising an alarm. The local authorities found only bodies, with no explanation for how anyone had breached their fortress. Ghost 9 became a whispered legend in the secure communication channels of intelligence agencies. Her handlers spoke of her with a mixture of awe and unease. How could someone so young move with such deadly precision? The codename followed her across continents, a reputation built on impossible successes and vanishing acts that defied explanation. "She's not human," one controller had remarked after Maria extracted a high-value asset from Damascus during an active artillery barrage. She calculated the shell trajectories in her head while running. What none of them saw was the toll this life extracted. Each night in anonymous hotel rooms, the operative stared at ceilings, unable to remember who she had been before becoming Ghost 9. Her personal possessions fit in a single backpack, no photographs, no mementos, nothing that could connect her to a past or future. The isolation was complete. Maria maintained no personal relationships, not even casual acquaintances. Her handlers rotated every 18 months to prevent attachment. She spoke 6 languages fluently, but had no one to talk to beyond mission parameters. Her only consistent companion was a small electronic device, secure encrypted, that delivered her next assignment. Once in Berlin, she spotted a former classmate from her pre-ghost life. For a moment, Maria considered approaching her, just to feel human connection again. Instead, she turned away, disappearing into the crowd. The woman would never know how close she'd come to meeting a ghost. This was the price of becoming legend: absolute solitude. Maria's existence was classified higher than most nuclear codes. Her missions saved countless lives, but no one would ever thank her. No medals would adorn her chest. Her reward was simply permission to continue existing in the space between worlds, neither fully alive nor dead, just a ghost with a number. 18 months before John Smith's question changed everything, Maria Silva received the call she'd been dreading. Her European handlers informed her that after 7 consecutive high-risk operations, she was being reassigned to Naval Special Warfare Command in Virginia Beach. The official reason: decompression time. The unofficial directive: prove she could maintain deep cover in plain sight, surrounded by the very people who hunted ghosts like her. "Consider it a cooling-off period," her controller had said through a secure line. "We need to know you can still blend in." The unspoken message was clear. They were testing whether their most valuable asset could function in normalcy without breaking character. Maria's first day at Virginia Beach felt surreal. She walked through security with carefully crafted credentials, nodding to personnel who had no idea they were greeting Ghost 9. Commander Pedro Costa welcomed her with a firm handshake and standard orientation, treating her like any other intelligence analyst. If only he knew she'd personally eliminated 3 of the targets mentioned in his morning briefing. The irony of her situation became a daily torment. Maria would analyze intelligence reports about terrorist cells she had infiltrated herself, discuss security vulnerabilities she had exploited, and review operational failures she had caused. During one briefing, a junior analyst struggled to explain how a high-value target in Prague had been neutralized without a trace. Sometimes these things just happen, Maria had offered with practiced casualness, knowing the Prague operation had been her handiwork. 12 hours of surveillance, followed by 3 seconds of action that left no evidence. Her colleagues respected her analytical mind, but saw only what she allowed them to see, a dedicated, somewhat reserved professional. They invited her to team gatherings, which she attended just often enough to avoid suspicion. She measured every word, calculated every gesture, and maintained the perfect distance, close enough to seem normal, distant enough to protect her secrets. At night in her sparse quarters, Maria would sometimes stare at the ceiling, wondering if she could ever truly be the person in her personnel file. The senior analyst would review dossiers on operations that Ghost 9 had executed, writing recommendations that deliberately obscured her own methods. The danger was always there, simmering beneath the surface. One wrong word, one slip in conversation, one too precise insight, and her cover would crumble. Yet part of her almost wished for discovery, for someone to see through the carefully constructed facade to the operative beneath. As months passed, Maria perfected her role while silently counting the days until her next real mission. Little did she know that her greatest test would come not from her handlers, but from a simple question in a crowded corridor. The fluorescent lights of the briefing room cast harsh shadows across the faces of 24 intelligence officers on that fateful Tuesday morning. Commander Pedro Costa strode to the front, his normally composed demeanor betraying subtle signs of tension. He tapped the screen behind him, bringing up satellite imagery of a sprawling compound perched on a Montenegrin cliff. "This is our situation," Commander Costa announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Dimitri Oliveira, arms dealer with connections to 3 terrorist networks, is preparing to move advanced weapons systems within 48 hours. Maria Silva sat straighter in her chair, her pulse quickening. The name Dimitri Oliveira wasn't just another target in a file. She had infiltrated his fortress personally, just 12 months earlier, during one of her final Ghost 9 operations. These weapons include prototype guided missiles and electronic warfare systems. The commander continued, pointing to logistics diagrams. Once distributed, they'll be untraceable. Lieutenant Carlos Santos raised his hand. "Sir, what's our insertion point? That compound looks like a fortress." Maria watched silently as the SEAL team leader and Commander Costa discussed approach vectors, each one more dangerous than the last. They were missing critical information: the maintenance tunnel beneath the east wing, the blind spot in the surveillance system, the climbing route she had used to extract herself when the operation went sideways. Her fingers tightened around her pen as the tactical discussion grew increasingly desperate. The team was planning to breach through the main security gate, a suicide mission. Maria knew exactly how many guards patrolled that entrance, how the automated defense systems were wired, the response protocols Oliveira had implemented. "Casualty estimates?" someone asked. "Potentially high," Commander Costa admitted, "but the alternative is worse." Maria's mind raced. She alone possessed the knowledge that could turn this impossible mission into a manageable operation. The hidden vulnerabilities she had discovered weren't visible on any satellite image or blueprint. They existed only in her memory, carefully documented in reports that had been classified at the highest levels, reports no one in this room had clearance to see. The realization settled heavily on her shoulders. She was the only one who could prevent a massacre of American operatives. Yet revealing her intimate knowledge of the compound would raise questions she couldn't answer without exposing her double life. Maria Silva, the analyst, shouldn't know these things. Only Ghost 9 would. As the planning continued, she faced an impossible choice: maintain her cover and watch good men die, or risk everything she'd built to save them. The clock was ticking, and lives hung in the balance. The tension in the command center was palpable as the tactical planning session dragged into its 3rd hour. Satellite images of Dmitry Oliveira's compound were spread across the digital displays, but the team had hit a wall. Every approach seemed to end in catastrophic risk assessments. Maria Silva sat quietly in the corner, her fingers tapping rhythmically against her coffee mug. She'd been watching the SEAL team grow increasingly frustrated, knowing she held the key to their success. The maintenance tunnel she'd used herself wasn't visible on any of their intelligence. "With all due respect, sir," she finally said, her voice cutting through the heated debate. "Historical records suggest there might be alternative entry points not visible on current surveillance." All eyes turned to her. Lieutenant Carlos Santos straightened, his weathered face revealing immediate skepticism. "What historical records?" he challenged. "We've gone through everything available." Maria maintained her composure, though her heart raced. Academic sources from the region indicate the compound was built over a former military installation. There may be structural weaknesses along the eastern perimeter. The intelligence analyst pointed to a section of the cliff face that appeared solid on their imagery. She knew better. Behind that rock face lay a narrow passage that would bypass 3 layers of security. "That's solid rock," one of the team members objected. "Not entirely," Maria replied. "I've had access to detailed intelligence suggesting otherwise." Lieutenant Santos crossed his arms. "And where exactly did this detailed intelligence come from?" "It's not in any of our briefings." The room grew silent. Commander Pedro Costa studied his analyst with newfound interest, his brow furrowed. "I maintain connections with certain academic sources," Maria offered carefully. "Sometimes historical architectural plans reveal more than modern surveillance." The tension in the room thickened. Everyone sensed she was holding back, but no one could pinpoint exactly what or why. Maria felt their stares, each second of silence increasing her risk of exposure. "These sources of yours," Santos pressed, "they're reliable enough to bet my men's lives on?" Maria met his gaze directly. "I wouldn't suggest it otherwise, Lieutenant." Commander Costa stepped forward. "Maria, if you have information critical to this operation, now is the time to share it fully." She nodded slowly, walking to the tactical display. With practiced precision, she began marking potential entry points, her fingers tracing the exact path she'd taken a year before. Her knowledge was too specific to be theoretical, too confident to be academic. "This route would bypass the majority of their security systems," she explained, careful not to reveal how she knew. "It's not in their defensive protocols because they don't believe anyone knows about it." The room fell silent again, but this time with a different energy. No one quite understood how she knew what she knew, but the tactical value was undeniable. The secure conference room door slammed shut with a finality that made Maria's pulse quicken. Commander Pedro Costa leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed, while Lieutenant Carlos Santos paced the length of the room, his tactical boots echoing on the polished floor. "Let's cut to the chase, Silva," the commander said, using her surname with deliberate formality. "You just described the ventilation system of a high-security compound that isn't on any of our satellite imagery." Maria maintained her composure, though her mind raced through possible explanations. "I've studied similar facilities extensively, sir." "That's not good enough," Lieutenant Santos interjected, stopping his pacing to face her directly. "You mentioned a blind spot in the northeastern perimeter that isn't in any of our intelligence reports. You described guard rotation patterns that match our most recent surveillance. How?" She carefully arranged her files, buying precious seconds. "I have academic contacts who specialize in Eastern European security architecture." Commander Costa's eyebrow raised skeptically. "Academics who know the exact patrol schedule of a Montenegro arms dealer?" "Research networks can be surprisingly thorough," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. She could feel the walls closing in around her carefully constructed identity. "Your personnel file shows no field experience," Santos continued, placing both hands on the table and leaning forward. "Yet you just gave us an infiltration plan that even our most seasoned operators would struggle to develop." Maria felt the weight of her dual life pressing down. Every instinct from 7 years of covert operations screamed at her to maintain her cover, while her analytical mind calculated the risk to the SEAL team if she withheld crucial information. "Sometimes intelligence analysis requires creative thinking," she offered, knowing how hollow it sounded. Commander Costa walked slowly around the table, studying her with the intensity that had made him legendary in intelligence circles. "I've worked with analysts for 20 years, Maria. The best ones know data. They know patterns. But what you know," he paused, "that's something else entirely." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. "Your suggestions weren't theoretical," Santos said quietly. "They were tactical, precise, the kind that come from someone who's been there." Maria met his gaze steadily. "I'm very thorough in my research, Lieutenant." Commander Costa exchanged a meaningful look with Santos. They both recognized the careful evasion for what it was. "Either you're the most gifted analyst I've ever encountered," the commander said slowly, "or there's something about Maria Silva that isn't in your file." He leaned closer, "And I'm starting to think it's the latter." Maria remained silent, her face betraying nothing, even as she realized her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. Commander Pedro Costa leaned over the tactical table, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of digital maps. "Time is running out. What's your recommendation, Silva?" Maria Silva studied the satellite imagery of the Montenegro compound, her mind racing through scenarios. The pressure in the room was palpable as both Pedro and Lieutenant Carlos Santos awaited her response. "A minimal footprint approach would be optimal," she said carefully. "One operator, maybe 2 at most. Someone with advanced climbing skills, electronic countermeasures expertise, and intimate knowledge of Eastern European operational protocols." Carlos exchanged glances with Commander Costa. "That's an unusually specific skill set." "It's what the mission requires," Maria replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The Western approach has a blind spot in the surveillance grid. Someone with the right training could exploit it." "And who exactly on this base has that combination of skills?" Pedro asked, his eyes narrowing. Maria fell silent. The question hung in the air as the reality became clear to everyone in the room. No one on their roster matched that description. No one they knew of, anyway. "We could request a specialist from Langley," Carlos suggested, "but that would take at least 48 hours to arrange." "We don't have 48 hours, Pedro countered, tapping the intelligence report. "Dimitri Oliveira is moving those weapons tomorrow night." Maria's pulse thundered in her ears. 24 lives were at stake. The SEAL team would be walking into a death trap without proper intelligence. She could save them, but at what cost? 7 years operating as Ghost 9, moving through the shadows, maintaining her cover. All of it would crumble if she revealed herself. She stared at the compound schematic, seeing not just the satellite image, but memories of the cool stone walls she'd scaled, the security system she'd bypassed, the guards whose patterns she'd memorized. The intelligence analyst bit her lip, weighing her options. "There might be another solution," she finally said, choosing each word with surgical precision. Commander Costa looked up, expectant. "We're listening." Maria's fingers traced the maintenance tunnel entrance she knew existed, but wasn't marked on any official blueprints. The weight of her secret identity pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. 24 lives against her carefully constructed cover, the mission against her future. "I can draw up detailed infiltration plans," she offered, threading the needle between revelation and concealment. "Based on analytical models." Pedro's expression hardened with suspicion. "This isn't theoretical, Silva. These are real operators risking their lives. Maria nodded, the enormity of her choice becoming clearer with each passing second. Ghost 9 could save them all, but Maria Silva would cease to exist as she knew herself. The mission window collapsed from days to mere hours. Maria Silva's intelligence updates flowed into the command center with alarming precision. Structural weaknesses, guard rotations, even the personal habits of Dimitri Oliveira's security team. The level of detail was extraordinary, raising eyebrows across the tactical planning room. Commander Pedro Costa pulled Maria aside, his voice low but intense. "These academic contacts of yours, they seem remarkably well-informed about a heavily guarded criminal compound. Care to explain that?" "My sources are reliable," she replied, maintaining her carefully constructed facade. "I've cultivated relationships with regional experts for years." The commander studied her face. "No analyst gets this kind of intelligence from professors and think tanks. Not this precise, not this current." Maria held his gaze without flinching. "With respect, sir, good analysts protect their sources." Back in the command center, the tension was palpable. Officers exchanged glances as Maria provided another update on the compound's western approach. Lieutenant Santos leaned toward a fellow SEAL, whispering, "Either she's the best analyst in naval history, or she's something else entirely." The intelligence officer maintained her composure, but she felt the walls closing in. 7 years of perfect anonymity threatened to unravel in a single afternoon. Every detail she shared to keep the team alive pushed her closer to exposure. The crisis escalated when a secure transmission arrived from European intelligence. The arms dealer had moved his timetable forward by 24 hours. The weapons transfer would happen tonight. "This changes everything," Captain Oliveira announced, his face grim. "We have no choice but to deploy immediately." Maria watched the SEAL team studying satellite imagery of the fortress. Imagery that failed to show the hidden tunnel she'd used herself, the blind spots in the security system she'd exploited, the patrol patterns she knew by heart. Lieutenant Santos outlined their approach, but Maria could see the flaws immediately. They would be walking into a death trap. The team would have 8 minutes to breach the compound before automated systems locked down the entire facility. "We need specialists for this," Santos admitted, "but there's no time to bring anyone in." Maria felt the weight of her double life crushing down. She could maintain her cover and watch good men die, or she could step out of the shadows and save them. Years of training had prepared her to remain hidden at all costs, but nothing had prepared her for this impossible choice. She glanced at the mission clock counting down. Time was running out, for both the SEALs and for Ghost 9. The tension in the command center had reached a breaking point. Maria Silva stood at the edge of the tactical table, watching as years of careful compartmentalization threatened to collapse around her. The satellite images of Dimitri Oliveira's compound glowed on the screens, a fortress she knew intimately but couldn't admit to knowing. "We're running out of options," Commander Costa said, rubbing his temples in frustration. "No team configuration gives us better than 60% survival odds." Maria took a deep breath. 7 years of training had taught her to remain invisible, but now lives hung in the balance. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "What if you already have someone on this base who can do the job?" The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. For the first time since her assignment to Virginia Beach, Maria deliberately let the carefully constructed mask slip. Her posture changed subtly, shoulders squared, stance balanced, eyes focused with the intensity of a predator rather than an analyst. Lieutenant Santos narrowed his eyes, studying her with newfound suspicion. "Are you saying you're qualified for a solo infiltration?" His tone carried equal parts skepticism and desperate hope. Maria met his gaze unflinchingly. "Sometimes, the right skills aren't listed in the official record." The intelligence officer who had been quietly taking notes looked up sharply. Commander Costa stepped closer, his expression unreadable as he reassessed the woman he thought he knew. "That's quite a claim from someone whose file shows no field training," he said carefully. Maria maintained her composure. "Files can be selective, sir." Lieutenant Santos circled the table, approaching her with the cautious respect usually reserved for unknown variables in combat. "You're suggesting you have operational experience? Infiltration capabilities?" "I'm suggesting," Maria replied, choosing each word with precision, "that I might be your best option for getting through those defenses without casualties." The command team exchanged glances, the unspoken realization spreading through the room. Their analyst, the quiet, efficient intelligence specialist who had been providing uncannily accurate assessments for months, was something else entirely. "If what you're implying is true," Commander Costa said slowly, "we need to know exactly who and what we're dealing with." Maria nodded once. "I understand, sir. But first, you need to decide if you want to hear the answer." The commander's phone rang, breaking the moment. The latest intelligence update. Oliveira had moved up his timeline again. The team now had less than 12 hours to act. "Very well, Miss Silva," Costa said after ending the call. "I believe it's time for a full briefing." The emergency briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command buzzed with tension as Maria Silva stood rigidly at attention. Commander Pedro Costa paced at the head of the table while Captain Oliveira and 3 other senior officers stared at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright suspicion. "Let me get this straight," Captain Oliveira said, breaking the silence. "You're claiming to have operational experience that doesn't appear in any of your official records?" His voice carried the weight of 25 years of military service. Maria maintained perfect composure. "Sir, my complete service record contains classified sections accessible only to those with specific clearance levels." She chose each word carefully, walking the tightrope between revelation and continued secrecy. Commander Costa slammed his palm on the table. "I've had top-level clearance for 9 years, analyst. There's nothing in your file suggesting field qualifications." "With respect, Commander, some assignments exist outside standard documentation channels," Maria replied. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of her statement sank in. Lieutenant Santos, who had been silently observing from the corner, stepped forward. "She knows things about the compound that aren't in any briefing materials. Things only someone who's been there would know." Captain Oliveira's eyes narrowed. "Prove it, right now." Maria nodded. "I can demonstrate advanced infiltration techniques, electronic countermeasures, and close-quarters combat skills. I can also provide operational details about 6 high-value targets currently being monitored by this command." The senior intelligence officer, a gray-haired woman who hadn't spoken until now, leaned forward. "That would take days to verify. The Montenegro window closes in 14 hours. "Exactly," Maria said. "There's no time for standard evaluation protocols." The officers exchanged glances. Captain Oliveira turned to Commander Costa. "Your analyst is either the most valuable asset we've never known about, or she's compromised. Which is it?" Costa studied Maria, seeing her differently now, not as the quiet analyst, but as someone who might have been hiding in plain sight all along. "If she's telling the truth, she could save the entire operation. If not—" "If I'm not," Maria interjected, "you lose nothing by keeping me here while the team proceeds as planned." Lieutenant Santos shook his head. "And if you are who you hint at being, we're sending our men into a death trap without their best chance of success." The room fell silent as the impossible choice settled on their shoulders. Trust an unverified operator with their most dangerous mission, or follow protocol and potentially sacrifice their team. Captain Oliveira finally broke the silence. "We need to make a decision, now." Despite Commander Pedro Costa's direct orders to stand down, Maria Silva couldn't bear the thought of the SEAL team walking into what she knew was a deadly trap. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest as she slipped away from the command center, her footsteps silent against the polished floors of the Naval Special Warfare Base. Inside her quarters, Maria knelt beside her standard-issue bed and removed a seemingly ordinary panel from the wall. Her fingers worked with practiced precision, revealing a hidden compartment that had remained undiscovered during 18 months of routine inspections. The secret cache contained the physical remnants of her other life, the life of Ghost 9. This wasn't how it was supposed to end, she whispered to herself as she extracted a weatherproof case. Inside lay an assortment of specialized equipment that no intelligence analyst should possess. Custom climbing gear rated for cliff faces, advanced electronic countermeasures, and compact weapons with serial numbers that led nowhere. Maria spread the items across her bed with methodical care. Each piece carried memories: the grappling hook she'd used in Prague, the communication device that had saved her team in Sarajevo, the tactical knife that had gotten her out of Damascus. She ran her fingers over each item, muscle memory awakening as her mind transitioned from analyst to operator. The woman who had spent months crafting reports and attending briefings disappeared. In her place emerged the ghost who had moved through Europe's darkest corners, leaving nothing but whispers. She checked each piece of equipment with practiced efficiency, testing tension on climbing cables, verifying battery life on electronic devices, confirming the functionality of her weapons. A small notebook emerged from the hidden compartment, handwritten in a cipher only she could read. The pages contained details about Dmitry Oliveira's compound that would never appear in official reports. Maria reviewed the layout, recalling the cold stone against her back, as she'd infiltrated the fortress 12 months earlier. She changed into nondescript clothing, nothing that would connect her to the Navy or America. The transformation was complete when she tucked her official ID into the hidden compartment and replaced it with documentation bearing a name that didn't exist in any legitimate database. As she packed her gear into an innocuous duffel bag, Maria glanced at her reflection. The analyst was gone. Ghost 9 had returned. Whatever happened in Montenegro, she knew there would be no going back to the careful life she'd constructed at Virginia Beach. Some ghosts, once revealed, could never return to the shadows. That night, Maria Silva slipped out of the Naval Special Warfare Command with practiced ease. She'd spent months establishing a predictable pattern. The analyst who worked late, often seen hunched over intelligence reports until the early hours. Tonight, that carefully cultivated reputation served as her perfect cover. She nodded casually to the night guard, mentioning something about cross-referencing Balkan intelligence reports. The guard barely looked up, accustomed to her dedication. Maria had calculated every detail, her clothing unremarkable, her backpack containing what appeared to be standard research materials while concealing specialized equipment beneath false compartments. 47 minutes later, she arrived at a private airfield 20 miles from Virginia Beach. The facility operated discreetly, catering to wealthy business people and government contractors who preferred to avoid questions. Maria presented credentials under one of her alternate identities, paperwork so meticulously forged that it had withstood scrutiny from border agents across 3 continents. "Weather looks clear all the way across," said the pilot, a former intelligence operative who asked no questions. He'd received his instructions through channels that existed outside official records, the shadow network that had supported Ghost 9's operations for years. The sleek jet lifted into the night sky, leaving American airspace behind. Maria changed in the cabin, transforming from analyst to operative. She removed colored contacts, revealing her natural eye color, a detail absent from her naval personnel file. Her movements were economical, practiced, the ritual, familiar after countless missions. As the aircraft crossed the Atlantic, Maria spread satellite imagery across the small table. She knew Dmitry Oliveira's compound intimately, every guard rotation, every blind spot in the security system. Her fingers traced potential entry points, muscle memory recalling the texture of the stone walls she'd scaled before. The young woman stared at her reflection in the darkened window. For 18 months, she'd tried to believe in the possibility of a normal life, colleagues who might become friends, perhaps even relationships not built on deception. That fragile dream was dissolving with every mile the jet covered. Ghost 9 is operational, she murmured into a secure communication device, using a frequency monitored by her European handlers. The acknowledgement came back as a simple tone. No names, no confirmation beyond the bare minimum. Maria closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. By morning, the Naval Command would discover her absence. Commander Costa would connect the dots. Lieutenant Santos would understand why her knowledge had been so precise. But none of that mattered now. The analyst was gone. In her place sat the operative whose existence had been merely whispered about in the most classified briefings. Ghost 9 was back in the field, and the mission was all that remained. The Montenegrin sunrise painted the Adriatic coast in hues of amber and gold. As Maria Silva approached the weathered stone building that served as her safe house, she moved with practiced efficiency, her body automatically falling into operational rhythms that had been dormant during her months at Virginia Beach. Inside the sparse room, Maria laid out her equipment with methodical precision. Her fingers moved across each item: communication devices, climbing gear, and specialized electronics, checking and rechecking with the thoroughness that had kept her alive for 7 years in the shadows. The analyst in her processed intelligence reports and satellite imagery, while the operative prepared for physical contingencies. Focus on what they don't expect, she whispered to herself, an old mantra from her European task force training. Through the grimy window, the arms dealer's compound loomed on the distant cliff, like a medieval fortress reimagined with modern security. Most military planners would deem it impregnable, a perfect defensive position with clear sight lines in all directions. But Maria knew better. She had infiltrated it before, mapping weaknesses that wouldn't appear on any official blueprint. As twilight descended, she slipped into darkness, her black tactical gear absorbing what little light remained. The young woman moved like water between rocks, utilizing natural cover that only someone intimately familiar with the terrain would recognize. Her breathing remained controlled, despite the steep climb toward the cliff base. The maintenance tunnel entrance was exactly where she remembered, hidden behind a cluster of boulders that appeared natural, but had been strategically placed. Maria paused, listening for patrol patterns. They'd changed slightly since her last visit, but the underlying rhythm remained predictable. Dimitri Oliveira might be a dangerous arms dealer, but his security protocols suffered from complacency. She timed her approach perfectly, slipping between sensor ranges with the precision of someone who had designed such systems herself. The tunnel entrance yielded to her touch, a combination of force and finesse that spoke to years of field experience. Cool, damp air enveloped her as she entered the fortress's underbelly. Maria's muscles remembered every turn, every junction. Her body moved on instinct, while her mind remained hyper-aware of potential threats. The weight of her equipment felt natural, an extension of herself rather than a burden. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, masking her already silent footsteps. The intelligence analyst was gone now, replaced entirely by Ghost 9, the operative whose existence had been nothing more than whispered legend until days ago. As she navigated deeper into the compound's foundation, Maria felt a strange sense of homecoming. Not to a place, but to a state of being, the perfect balance between calculated risk and instinctive action that had defined her secret life for so long. Inside the compound, Maria moved like a shadow through the maze of corridors, her body instinctively remembering every turn and blind spot. The fortress's interior was a labyrinth designed to confuse and trap intruders, but to her, it was a familiar puzzle she'd solved before. Motion sensors lined the hallways at irregular intervals, technology she'd studied and memorized during her previous infiltration. she flattened against a wall as a guard passed, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Maria Silva held her breath, counting the seconds until he disappeared around the corner. This wasn't theoretical intelligence work anymore. This was the reality she'd lived for 7 years before her cooling-off assignment. The power center lay 3 levels below, behind a series of security checkpoints. Maria navigated past them with practiced precision, using the maintenance access routes invisible to standard surveillance. Her fingers worked deftly as she bypassed an electronic lock, the skills honed through countless missions flowing naturally. When she finally reached the central hub, the intelligence analyst surveyed the room with clinical efficiency. Banks of servers hummed alongside security monitors, displaying feeds from throughout the compound. Working methodically, she inserted a small device into the main console. Within moments, she had control of the entire security network. Just like last time, she whispered to herself as her fingers danced across the keyboard. One by one, she compromised the systems. Surveillance cameras set to loop harmless footage, electronic locks subtly reconfigured, radio networks adjusted to create dead zones where the team could move undetected. Maria checked her watch. The SEAL team would be approaching the primary entry point, a route that would now lead them directly into a newly established ambush. She activated her communication device, encrypting the transmission before sending. Primary approach compromised. Use alternate route. Coordinates transmitting now. At the command center miles away, Lieutenant Carlos Santos stared at the unexpected message. The team had no intel assets inside the fortress, yet here was precise information, delivered at the perfect moment, guiding them away from certain disaster. Who sent this? He demanded, but deep down, he already suspected. The SEALs, trained to adapt, quickly pivoted to the alternate route. They moved through the compound with surprising ease, finding security systems mysteriously offline and guard patrols absent from key junctions. As Maria continued her work, disabling the final security measures around the weapons cache, she allowed herself a moment of professional satisfaction. The team would complete their mission and return safely, never knowing that the quiet analyst from Virginia Beach had cleared their path and saved their lives. Maria Silva moved like a shadow through the compound, 3 steps ahead of the SEAL team following her instructions. With practiced precision, she neutralized a guard at the northeastern corridor, using a sleeper hold that left him unconscious without making a sound. His body was carefully positioned in a utility closet, radio disabled. Patrol pattern changed on the 2nd level. She whispered into her communication device. Redirect to the service elevator shaft. Maintenance access panel unlocked. The intelligence analyst's fingers flew across the security terminal, creating a loop in the surveillance feed that would mask the team's approach. Years of covert operations had made this second nature to her. The careful manipulation of electronic systems, the calculated timing of patrol intersections, the silent takedowns. Lieutenant Santos received her updates with growing amazement. The intel was impossibly precise, as if someone was physically inside the fortress guiding them. His team moved through what should have been impenetrable defenses like ghosts themselves, encountering none of the resistance they'd expected. 2 hostiles approaching intersection point Charlie, Maria warned. Hold position for 17 seconds. She watched from her vantage point as Dimitri Oliveira's security detail passed unwittingly beneath her. The arms dealer had spared no expense on personnel, but even the best guards were useless against someone who knew every blind spot in their system. Maria disabled the power to the eastern wing, creating a distraction that drew half the security team away from the weapons cache. As they scrambled to check the electrical systems, she silently sabotaged their communication network, introducing subtle interference that would prevent coordination. The SEAL team reached the primary target zone with unprecedented ease. What should have been a firefight became a surgical strike. The weapons, advanced missile guidance systems that would have devastated civilian targets, were secured within minutes. When Dmitri himself appeared, flanked by his personal guards, the team was already in position. The notorious arms dealer found himself surrounded before he could reach his panic room. "How did you get in here?" he demanded as Lieutenant Santos secured his hands with zip ties. "This is impossible." Maria watched from the shadows, a rare smile crossing her face. For years, her work had been thankless, invisible victories that no one would ever know about. But tonight was different. She could see the results directly: the captured weapons, the neutralized threat, and most importantly, a team of SEALs who would all return home alive. As the extraction began, Maria slipped away, taking an alternate route to her extraction point. The team would never know she had been there, clearing their path, eliminating threats before they materialized. Ghost 9 had lived up to her name once again. The briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command in Virginia Beach fell into stunned silence as Captain Oliveira slammed his fist on the conference table. The Montenegro operation had succeeded beyond all expectations. 0 casualties, all objectives achieved, with intelligence so precise it seemed impossible. "I want answers," Captain Oliveira demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. How did a team facing suicide odds suddenly receive perfect intel from inside that fortress? Who was feeding you information? The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Lieutenant Carlos Santos cleared his throat and slowly turned toward Maria Silva, who sat quietly at the end of the table, reviewing after-action reports. "You," the lieutenant said, his voice a mixture of accusation and awe. "You said you had skills we didn't know about. Was it you in Montenegro?" Maria looked up, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. For 7 years, Maria looked up, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. She had lived in shadows, her achievements unacknowledged, her sacrifices unknown. The analyst placed her pen down deliberately, buying precious seconds to decide her future. "The intelligence came through verified channels," she began carefully. But Commander Pedro Costa cut her off. "Maria, enough." The intelligence hen's voice was firm, but not unkind. "We've reviewed the transmission signatures. They match patterns only you use. The infiltration route matches your suggested approach exactly." The room grew impossibly quieter. Maria straightened her shoulders, feeling the ghost identity she'd carried for years finally merging with her present self. "Sometimes, serving your country means going beyond your assigned role," she answered, her voice steady. "I did what was necessary to ensure mission success." Her admission hung in the air. No one moved. "Ghost 9, Commander Costa said quietly. That's what you told John Smith when he asked for your call sign, isn't it? Before you disappeared that day?" Maria nodded once, the simple gesture confirming years of speculation. "You've been operating under deep cover," Captain Oliveira stated, rather than asked. "European task force?" "I'm not at liberty to confirm specifics," Maria replied, her training still holding firm despite the revelation. Lieutenant Santos leaned forward. "You saved my men. Whatever you did before coming here, whatever your real assignment is, thank you." The tension in the room transformed into something else: respect. These hardened military professionals suddenly understood they had been working alongside a legend without knowing it. "I believe," Commander Costa said, carefully, "we need to reevaluate Analyst Silva's role within this command." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew the truth, even if no one dared say it aloud. Ghost 9 was real, and she had been hiding in plain sight all along. Word spread across Naval Special Warfare Command like wildfire. The quiet analyst with the uncanny insights wasn't just good at her job. She was Ghost 9, the operative whose exploits had become legend in classified briefings. Within days, Maria Silva's reputation transformed, from respected intelligence specialist to something approaching mythical status. Commander Pedro Costa, who had always sensed there was more to Maria than her file suggested, made a bold decision. He reassigned her to work directly with special operations teams. creating a new position that bridged intelligence and tactical operations. "Your skills are wasted behind a desk," he told her during a private meeting. "The teams need someone who understands both sides of the mission." For the first time in 7 years, Maria stepped into the light. No more hiding her capabilities. No more carefully measured responses. The transition wasn't easy. Years of secrecy had become second nature. But there was an undeniable freedom in finally being recognized for who she truly was. "I never thought I'd see the day when Ghost 9 would be teaching us," Lieutenant Santos remarked during a tactical planning session. The SEAL team leader, who had once questioned her knowledge, now deferred to her expertise without hesitation. The operators who had initially viewed her with skepticism now sought her counsel before missions. They recognized that Maria's insights weren't theoretical. They were forged through years of solitary operations in hostile territory. She trained alongside them, demonstrating infiltration techniques that weren't in any manual, sharing countermeasures that had saved her life in places no one knew she'd been. "The difference between theory and practice," she explained to a group of junior operators, "is that theory doesn't bleed when you get it wrong." At the firing range, in simulation rooms, and during planning sessions, Maria's presence elevated everyone around her. She didn't just provide intelligence, she transformed how the teams interpreted and applied it. Her approach to mission planning incorporated both analytical precision and the instincts of someone who had faced death alone, with no extraction team standing by. The base culture shifted subtly but profoundly. The artificial wall between intelligence analysts and operators began to dissolve. Maria became the bridge between worlds that had always been meant to work together, but rarely truly did. "You've changed this place," Commander Costa told her 6 months after Montenegro. "You've made us better." Maria nodded, allowing herself a rare smile. After years of shadows, she had found her place in the light. 6 months after the Montenegro operation, Maria Silva's life had transformed completely. No longer confined to the shadows of her analyst's role, she now served as the bridge between intelligence and operations, her unique blend of skills reshaping how Naval Special Warfare Command approached its most challenging missions. The corridors at Virginia Beach buzzed with a different energy when Maria walked through them. Junior officers who once barely noticed her now straightened their posture as she passed. Seasoned operators sought her counsel before deployments. The woman who had spent years hiding in plain sight had become the command's most visible asset. Commander Pedro Costa had created a special position for her, officially titled Advanced Operations Consultant, but everyone knew what it really meant. Ghost 9 was now operating in the light. "Your integration protocols have increased team survival rates by 38%, Lieutenant Carlos Santos told her one afternoon as they reviewed mission parameters. The SEAL team leader who had once questioned her every suggestion now implemented her tactics without hesitation. "I still can't believe we had a legend filing reports right under our noses." Maria smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best place to hide is where everyone can see you." Captain Oliveira had been the most difficult to win over. His military traditionalism initially resistant to Maria's unorthodox background. Yet even he had come around after witnessing 3 consecutive high-risk extractions, executed flawlessly under her guidance. "Silva," he'd acknowledged during the last command briefing, "your field experience has proven invaluable." What remained unspoken was how Maria had fundamentally changed the integration between intelligence and operations. Teams now trained differently, planned differently, executed differently, all influenced by her lived experience on both sides of the mission. John Smith, the officer whose simple question had started it all, now worked closely with Maria on developing new protocols. "You know what people still talk about?" he asked her once. "That day you just said Ghost 9 and disappeared. It's become something of a legend around here." Maria's response was characteristically measured. "Legends are useful. They inspire people to push beyond what they think is possible." The truth was more complex. Maria still carried the isolation of her former life, the weight of decisions made in darkness. But for the first time, she belonged somewhere. Her skills acknowledged, her contributions valued openly. As she watched a team prepare for deployment using her techniques, Maria reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. The analyst who had lived as a ghost now shaped the future of covert operations, her methods becoming doctrine, her experience becoming legacy. And in the shadowed corridors of intelligence agencies across the world, the legend of Ghost 9 continued to grow.